On the morning of Friday, February 5, 2016, inside the heavily guarded headquarters of the Bangladesh Central Bank in Dhaka, a problem emerged in a room that was supposed to be infallible. It was the SWIFT room, a highly secure, restricted access area containing the terminals used to move billions of dollars across the globe. The system was designed to automatically print a physical receipt every time a transaction was processed. But on this particular morning, the printer was dead. The screen showed an error message. A critical file was missing. The bank staff assumed it was a simple technical glitch, a common IT issue. They tried to restart the software, but the system remained stubbornly unresponsive. Since Friday is the start of the weekend in Bangladesh, the room was mostly empty, and the urgency was low. They decided to leave it for another day. It wasn't until Saturday morning that technicians finally managed to reboot the terminals. And that is when the printer suddenly woke up. It began violently spitting out paper. Receipt after receipt poured from the machine, piling up on the floor. When the staff finally picked up the papers and read the printouts, the blood drained from their faces. The receipts were confirmation of transfers, while the printer had been disabled. Someone had accessed the bank's terminal and sent dozens of messages to the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. The unknown operators had ordered the transfer of nearly $1 billion out of the national reserves of Bangladesh. And the money was already gone. To understand how $1 billion can quietly slip out of a heavily guarded central bank, you have to go back exactly 1 year before the printer broke. January 2015. An employee at the Bangladesh bank received an email. It appeared to be a standard job application from a man named Razul Hassan. Attached to the email was his resume, contained in a zip file. It was a mundane event in a massive organization. But the resume was not a document. It was a highly sophisticated piece of malware. When the employee clicked to download it, the malicious code silently unpacked itself and slipped into the bank's internal network. No alarm sounded. No antivirus software caught it. The intruders were now inside. But they did not immediately start stealing money. Instead, they waited. For months, the hackers operated like digital ghosts. They moved slowly through the bank's computer network, mapping its architecture, jumping from one server to another until they found their ultimate target, the computers connected to the SWIFT network. SWIFT, or the Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunication, is the messaging system that banks use to securely authorize international money transfers. It is the backbone of global finance. But the hackers knew that simply accessing SWIFT was not enough. To steal the money, they had to understand how the humans operated it. So, they sat in the shadows and watched. They recorded keystrokes. They observed when the employees logged in, when they took their lunch breaks, and how they formatted their transfer requests. They even learned the specific jargon the Bangladesh bank used when communicating with the Federal Reserve in New York. The hackers were not just breaking into a vault. They were learning how to perfectly impersonate the bank itself. They customized specialized malware to bypass the bank's security protocols and, crucially, to disable the SWIFT printer so that no physical evidence of their actions would be immediately visible. By late January 2016, the stage was set. The hackers had the access, the knowledge, and the tools. All they needed now was the perfect time to strike. In the world of high-stakes cyber heists, timing is just as important as the code. The hackers had analyzed the global calendar and found a rare, perfect alignment of international holidays. A blind spot in the global banking system that would give them exactly the time they needed to move the money and disappear. The operation began on Thursday, February 4th, at 8 o'clock in the evening, Bangladesh time. While the bank employees in Dhaka were heading home, the hackers logged into the SWIFT terminals remotely. They began firing off transfer requests to the Federal Reserve Bank in New York, instructing them to move money from the Bangladesh bank's account into various private accounts in Asia. 35 separate transactions were queued up, totaling $951 million. The timing was masterful. Friday is the official weekend in Bangladesh. The central bank in Dhaka was closed. But in New York, it was Thursday morning, a normal business day. The Federal Reserve's automated systems received the perfectly formatted SWIFT messages, complete with the correct digital credentials. Believing the requests were entirely legitimate, the New York Fed began processing the payments. By the time Bangladesh bank staff discovered the broken printer and the receipts on Saturday, the New York Fed was closed for the American weekend. No one in New York was answering the phones. But the hackers had planned even further ahead. Monday, February 8th, was the Lunar New Year, a major banking holiday across Asia, including the Philippines, where the money was being routed. Furthermore, the following Monday was President's Day in the United States, meaning the New York Fed would be closed again. The hackers had engineered a window of nearly 5 days where the banks involved were completely out of sync, unable to communicate, and severely understaffed. The vault was open, the guards were on holiday, and nearly $1 billion was flying across the globe at the speed of light. Despite the flawless timing and the compromised digital credentials, the Federal Reserve Bank of New York has its own automated security systems designed to flag suspicious activity. And moving $1 billion in a single evening inevitably triggers alarms. As the 35 transactions flooded into New York, the Fed system flagged a massive discrepancy. The requests were sending hundreds of millions of dollars to personal and corporate accounts that had no historical relationship with the Bangladesh Central Bank. The New York Fed temporarily halted 30 of the transactions, holding up $850 million, and sent messages back to Dhaka asking for re-verification. But because the hackers had broken the printer in Dhaka, nobody saw the warning messages. However, 5 transactions did manage to slip through the initial automated checks. One was a $20 million transfer routed to a non-governmental organization in Sri Lanka. The money arrived at Deutsche Bank, acting as a routing bank, which was supposed to forward it to the final destination, the Shalika Foundation. But an eagle-eyed compliance officer at Deutsche Bank noticed something strange. The routing instructions did not say Shalika Foundation. They said Shalika Fandation. Fandation. A simple spelling mistake. That single typo prompted Deutsche Bank to hold the $20 million and ask the Bangladesh bank for clarification. By the time the dust settled, the typo and the Fed's automated flags had saved $870 million. The grand plan of stealing $1 billion had been severely crippled. But it was not a total failure. For transactions, totaling exactly $81 million, had successfully bypassed all security checks. The money cleared the Federal Reserve, crossed the Pacific Ocean, and landed in the Philippines. The $81 million arrived at a specific branch of the Rizal Commercial Banking Corporation, or RCBC, located on Jupiter Street in Makati City, the financial heart of Manila. This was not a random destination. The ground game in the Philippines had been prepared nearly a year in advance. In May 2015, around the same time the hackers were first exploring the Bangladesh bank servers, 4 bank accounts were opened at this exact RCBC branch. The accounts were opened using 4 different names and 4 identical initial deposits of $500. The identification documents provided were driver's licenses. It was later discovered that all 4 individuals were entirely fictitious, and the licenses were forged. For 9 months, these accounts sat dormant, untouched, waiting for a single event. On February 5th, the $81 million poured into these 4 fake accounts. Back in Dhaka, panic was setting in. By Monday, the Bangladesh bank finally managed to contact RCBC in the Philippines, sending frantic stop payment messages, begging them to freeze the funds. But the messages were ignored. The branch manager, a woman named Maya DeGuido, would later claim she was just a pawn, acting under intense pressure and threats from powerful individuals above her. Whatever the truth, the stop payment orders were disregarded. Over the next few days, a massive withdrawal operation commenced. The stolen digital funds were rapidly transferred out of the 4 fake accounts, consolidated, and converted into hard cash. Millions of dollars were withdrawn in physical Philippine pesos and US dollars. The money was stuffed into bags, loaded into armored vehicles, and driven away from the Jupiter Street branch. The digital trail was ending. The money was entering the physical world. Tracking money across international borders is difficult, but not impossible. Financial investigators can follow wire transfers, audit bank records, and trace the digital footprints left by every transaction. The criminals knew this. They needed a way to wash the $81 million so thoroughly that no government agency could ever recover it. They needed a black hole. In the Philippines, they found one. At the time of the heist, the anti-money laundering laws in the Philippines contained a massive loophole. Casinos were completely exempt from reporting suspicious transactions. The armored cars carrying the stolen cash drove directly to a remittance company called Philrem. From there, the money was distributed to 2 of Manila's most luxurious gambling establishments, the Soler Resort and Casino, and the Midas Hotel and Casino. The operation was brilliant in its simplicity. The stolen cash was exchanged for millions of dollars in casino chips. These chips were then brought into private, high-roller VIP rooms, controlled by junket operators, middlemen who facilitate gambling for ultra-wealthy clients, often from mainland China. At the baccarat tables, the chips were played, traded, and passed around. In the ecosystem of a casino, money loses its identity. Once the chips have been sufficiently circulated through the gambling rooms, they were cashed out. But the money paid out by the casino was now legally clean. It was considered gambling winnings or legitimate business revenue. The money was then wired to bank accounts in Hong Kong and other jurisdictions, disappearing into the vast, untraceable ocean of global shadow finance. The $81 million had vanished. The fallout from the heist was global and immediate. The governor of the Bangladesh Central Bank, Dr. Aisha Rahman, resigned in disgrace. The global banking community was paralyzed by the realization that SWIFT, the bedrock of international finance, could be manipulated so easily. In the Philippines, investigations led to dramatic Senate hearings. Branch manager Maya DeGuido was convicted of money laundering and sentenced to prison. The remittance company was shut down. But the people who actually sat behind the keyboards and orchestrated the theft were never arrested. As the FBI and international cybersecurity firms analyzed the malware used in the attack, they found distinct digital fingerprints. The code shared specific, highly complex characteristics with the malware used in a devastating 2014 hack of Sony Pictures. The evidence pointed in a terrifying direction. This was not a group of rogue teenagers in a basement. The FBI formally attributed the attack to the Lazarus Group, a state-sponsored cyber warfare syndicate operating out of North Korea. Facing crushing international sanctions, the North Korean government had allegedly turned to cybercrime to fund its regime, replacing traditional espionage with digital bank robbery. Out of the $81 million stolen, only about $15 million was ever recovered, abandoned by a junket operator. The rest remains lost. The Bangladesh bank heist stands as a chilling milestone in modern history. It proved that the most secure financial fortresses in the world do not need to be breached with explosives or guns. They can be emptied from thousands of miles away, armed with nothing but patience, a fake resume, and a deep understanding of human error. It was a perfect crime, almost. If not for a single spelling mistake, the world would have witnessed a billion-dollar disappearance.